The massive space station hung in the void like a metallic city. Its towers stretched for miles in every direction, gleaming under the light of 3 distant suns. This was Nexus Prime, the heart of the Galactic Federation. Today, for the first time in human history, representatives from Earth would walk its corridors. Commander G1 stood at the viewing port of the human transport ship, watching the station grow larger as they approached. Her uniform was crisp and clean, but she felt small compared to the enormous structure ahead. Behind her, military advisor Hyunwoo checked his equipment one more time. The xenobiologist Soman was busy taking notes on everything she could see through the windows. "It's bigger than our entire moon," Soman whispered, her voice filled with wonder. "Size doesn't always mean strength," Hyunwoo replied quietly. His eyes were already studying the defensive positions and weapon placements he could see on the station's surface. The docking process took 3 hours. When they finally stepped onto the station, Ji-won was struck by how different everything felt. The gravity was lighter than Earth's, and the air had a strange metallic taste. Alien beings walked past them without giving them a second look. Some were tall and covered in thick, armor-like skin. Others floated instead of walking, their bodies glowing with soft blue light. A mechanical voice spoke from hidden speakers. "Human delegation, proceed to Council Chamber 7. Do not deviate from the marked path." The path was marked with yellow lights on the floor. As they followed it, Ji-won noticed that other aliens used different colored paths. The red paths seemed to be for the tall, armored beings. The blue paths were for the floating ones. Yellow was clearly the lowest priority. Council Chamber 7 was smaller than Ji-won had expected. It looked like a courtroom, with high seats arranged in a circle. The human delegation was directed to a small platform in the center. Around them, dozens of alien beings took their places in the elevated seats. The largest of the armored aliens spoke first. His voice was deep and rumbling, like distant thunder. "I am Council Prime Thexvor of the Vorthak Empire. You are the humans from the planet called Earth." "That is correct," Ji-won replied, keeping her voice steady. "We are honored to be here and hope to join the Galactic Federation as full members." A sound like laughter came from several of the aliens. One of the floating blue beings drifted closer. When it spoke, its voice sounded like music played through water. "I am Xiphon 7 of the Malari Collective. We have studied your species. You are very small and weak compared to most galactic life forms. Our strength may not be physical," Ji-won said carefully, "but we have other qualities that could benefit the Federation." Thexvor's large head tilted to one side. "What qualities?" "You have no natural armor. You cannot survive in most environments without artificial protection. Your technology is thousands of years behind ours. You live for less time than most of our children." Hyunwoo's jaw tightened, but he remained silent. Soman continued taking notes, her pen moving quickly across her paper. Another alien, this one covered in what looked like metal plates, spoke up. "Your planet has only one intelligent species. Most worlds develop 3 or 4 before they achieve space travel. This suggests you destroyed the others. Are you a violent race?" "Humans can be violent when necessary," Ji-won admitted, "but we prefer peaceful solutions to problems." "Necessary violence," Xiphon 7 repeated, the musical quality of its voice making the words sound almost mocking. How primitive. Advanced civilizations have moved beyond such concepts. The discussion continued for 2 hours. Every human achievement was dismissed as crude or primitive. Every human strength was reframed as a weakness. When Ji-won mentioned humanity's adaptability, Thexvor called it a lack of proper specialization. When she spoke of human creativity, the metal-plated alien said it showed an inability to follow proper procedures. Finally, Thexvor raised one massive hand for silence. The Council has reached a decision. Humanity will be granted observer status within the Galactic Federation. You may maintain a small diplomatic presence here at Nexus Prime. You may observe Council meetings, but not participate in votes. You may request permission to establish limited trade relationships with member species. Observer status? Jiwan asked. For how long? Until you prove you are worthy of full membership, Xiphon 7 replied. This may take several hundred of your years, if you survive that long. The dismissal was clear. The aliens began filing out. Of the chamber, many of them making sounds that Jiwan suspected were laughter. Soon, only the 3 humans remained on the platform. Well, Soman said finally, that went about as well as we expected. Worse, Hyunwoo muttered. They don't just think we're weak, they think we're beneath their notice entirely. A small robot rolled up to them, its mechanical voice polite but cold. Human delegation, you will be assigned quarters in Section Yellow 7. Your access will be limited to educational and cultural areas only. Military and technological zones are restricted. Their quarters were small but functional. 3 rooms, connected by a narrow hallway with basic furniture and a small food preparation area. The windows looked out onto a busy corridor where aliens of all types went about their business. That evening, as they sat around a small table eating rations, from Earth, Jiwan looked at her companions. So what do you think? Somin was still writing in her notebook. They're overconfident. Every species here seems to think their way is the only right way. They've probably never faced a real challenge in thousands of years. The military formations I saw were impressive but predictable, Hyunwoo added. All their strategies seem based on overwhelming force and superior technology. They don't seem to understand tactics or adaptation. And their politics? Jiwan asked. Rigid hierarchy, Somin replied. Everyone knows their place and stays in it. No innovation, no creative thinking, just following the same patterns their ancestors used. Hyunwoo leaned back in his chair. They see weakness where they should see adaptability. They think our lack of specialization makes us inferior. They don't understand that it makes us unpredictable. So what do? Jiwan asked. We watch, we learn, we wait, Somin said, closing her notebook. Every species has blind spots. We just need to find theirs. And then? Hyunwoo asked with a slight smile. Then we show them what humans are really capable of, Jiwan replied. Outside their windows, the great station continued its eternal rotation. Millions of aliens went about their daily lives, confident in their superiority and their place in the galaxy. None of them suspected that everything was about to change. The humans had arrived, and they were nothing like what the galaxy expected. 3 months had passed since the humans arrived at Nexus Prime. Dr. Minho walked through the engineering section, carrying a data pad and trying to look enthusiastic about his assignment. The Vorthak military architect Kelthrin towered over him, pointing at holographic displays with one massive finger. Human! Your suggestions are completely wrong, Kelthrin rumbled, his voice filled with contempt. This defensive system design has worked for 1,000 years. We do not need your primitive ideas to improve it. Minho looked at the design on the screen. It was impressive but rigid. Massive weapons platforms arranged in perfect geometric patterns, each one designed to deliver maximum firepower in a specific direction. I understand the design is proven, he said carefully. I was just thinking that maybe some backup systems could help if something unexpected happens. Unexpected? Kelthrin's laugh sounded like rocks falling down a mountain. What could be unexpected? Any enemy ship that approaches will be destroyed by our superior firepower. This is how war is conducted in civilized space. Of course, Minho agreed, making notes on his pad. I'll study the design more carefully. Yes, you will, and you will stop wasting my time with your crude human thinking. Kelthrin turned back to his work, dismissing Minho as if he were an annoying insect. Across the station, Captain Yuna was having her own problems. She stood on the bridge of a patrol vessel, watching as Commander Vexi Tar demonstrated proper alien military procedures to the mixed-species crew. "Observe how a real warrior handles ship operations," Vextar announced loudly, his multiple arms moving across the control panels with practiced precision. "Not like these weak humans who need computers to help them with everything. The alien." Crew members made sounds of agreement. Some of them looked at Yuna with expressions she was learning to recognize as alien laughter. She kept her face neutral and continued with her assigned tasks, which mostly involved cleaning equipment and running simple errands. "Human Yuna," Vextar called out. "Go to engineering and bring me a report on power consumption. Try not to get lost on the way." More alien laughter filled the bridge. Yuna nodded and left, walking slowly through the ship's corridors. But she wasn't just running errands. Her eyes noted every detail of the ship's layout, every security system, every weak point in the design. Her human brain was mapping everything, storing information that her alien crewmates assumed she was too stupid to understand. Back on Nexus Prime, Ambassador Wu Jin sat in a conference room with several alien trade representatives. The room was designed for beings much larger than humans, so he had to use a special platform just to reach the table level. Merchant Lord Quilzac, whose body looked like a giant beetle made of gold, was explaining galactic economics with obvious boredom. "You see, little human, the galactic trade network is far too complex for your primitive understanding. Your species has nothing of value to offer to advanced civilizations like ours." "I'm sure we could find something," Wu Jin said politely. "Perhaps cultural exchanges, or different perspectives on problem-solving." "Culture?" Another merchant, this one shaped like a floating crystal, made a sound like breaking glass. "Your species has barely left its home planet. What culture could you possibly have that would interest us?" "Different perspectives?" Quilzac's mandibles clicked together in what Wu Jin had learned was alien laughter. "We have perfected our methods over millions of years. We do not need new perspectives." Wu Jin nodded and smiled, making notes on his datapad. But behind his polite expression, his mind was working. He was an economist before becoming a diplomat, and he could see things the aliens missed. Their trade network was impressive, but brittle. Everything depended on a few key routes and resources. It was efficient, but not adaptable. Meanwhile, on the outer edge of Federation space, Scout Do-hyun and pilot Nari were learning about alien efficiency the hard way. Their small survey ship had run into trouble in an asteroid field, and they had called for help. "Federation Control, this is Scout Ship Harmony," Do-hyun spoke into his communicator. "We have engine damage and are drifting toward a large asteroid. Request immediate assistance." The reply came back in the flat, emotionless tone that Federation Control used for all communications. "Scout Ship Harmony, your vessel is classified as a low priority. Assistance will be provided when resources become available." "How long will that be?" Nari asked, her hands dancing over the control panels as she tried to restart their damaged engines. "Estimated time for assistance. 16 hours, Control replied. 16 hours. Do-hyun looked at his instruments. "We'll hit that asteroid in 3 hours. "That is unfortunate. Please prepare for emergency procedures." The communication ended. Nari and Do-hyun looked at each other for a moment. Then Nari smiled grimly. "Well, I guess we do this ourselves. Can you get us out of here?" "Maybe. But I'll have to fly like a human, not like an alien." She began shutting down the automated systems that alien ships relied on. "Hold on. This is going to be interesting." For the next 2 hours, Nari flew their damaged ship through the asteroid field using skills no alien pilot possessed. She used the ship's thruster in ways the designers never intended, bouncing off smaller asteroids, using their gravity to slingshot around larger ones. It was dangerous, crazy, and completely impossible according to alien flight computers. But it worked, They limped out of the asteroid field with their ship battered but intact, just as Federation rescue ships finally arrived. "Scout Ship Harmony, this is Rescue Command. We are prepared to assist you." "Thank you, Rescue Command," Do-Yun replied. "But we're fine now. We got ourselves out." There was a long pause. How is that possible? Our computers show that escape from that asteroid field was impossible without assistance. "We're humans," Nari said simply. "We don't always listen to computers." That evening, all the human personnel on Nexus Prime gathered in Ji-Won's quarters for their weekly meeting. The room was crowded, but everyone found a place to sit or stand. "So," Ji-Won began, "how is everyone adjusting to life in the Federation?" "They're not just underestimating us," Minho said. "They're actively trying to humiliate us. Kelthrin treats me like I'm barely intelligent enough to understand basic tools." "Same here," Yuna added. "Vextar makes me do degrading tasks while the alien crew laughs. But they're also careless. They don't think I'm smart enough to understand what I'm seeing." "The trade representatives are worse," Wu Jin said. "They act like we're children playing at being adults. But their economic system has some serious vulnerabilities they don't even notice. And they're willing to let us die rather than inconvenience themselves," Nari added, telling the group about their experience in the asteroid field. Soman, who had been quietly listening, spoke up. "I've been studying their social patterns. Every species here follows the same basic structure: rigid hierarchy, specialized roles, predictable responses to problems. They've eliminated diversity of thought." "What does that mean for us?" Ji-Won asked. "It means they literally cannot imagine that." "We might think differently than they do," Hyunwoo said. "They see our adaptability as weakness because they can't understand it. They see our creativity as disorder because it doesn't fit their patterns." "So what do we do about it?" "We let them keep underestimating us," Hyunwoo continued. "We smile and nod and act grateful for their wisdom. And meanwhile, we learn everything we can about how their systems really work." "And then?" someone asked. "Then we show them that sometimes the student becomes the teacher," Ji-Won replied. Around the room, the humans nodded in agreement. They had come to the stars hoping to find friends and allies. Instead, they had found arrogance and contempt. But they were learning that the galaxy's greatest strength might also be its greatest weakness. The aliens had grown so accustomed to their superiority that they had forgotten how to recognize a real threat when it appeared. Dr. Minho had learned to work very quietly. While Kelthrin focused on the impressive main displays of the defensive system, Minho worked on the smaller subsystems that the Vorthak engineer considered beneath his attention. His fingers moved carefully across the interface, installing what he called adaptive protocols into the backup systems. "What are you doing now, human?" Kelthrin asked without looking up from his own work. "Just adding some backup routines," Minho replied innocently, "in case the main systems get damaged somehow." "Damaged? Our systems do not get damaged. They are built by Vorthak engineers, the finest in the galaxy." Kelthrin's voice carried the automatic pride that Minho had learned to recognize in all the alien species. "Of course, but just in case something unexpected happens." "Nothing unexpected happens in modern warfare. Everything is calculated, everything is planned." Kelthrin finally looked at Minho's work. "What is this redundant pathway system?" "Oh, that's just human paranoia," Minho said with a self-deprecating smile. "We always want backup systems for our backup systems. It's probably unnecessary." Kelthrin snorted in disgust. "Typical human inefficiency. But I suppose it does no harm. It will never be needed anyway." What Kelthrin didn't understand was that Minho's paranoid systems could do much more than just provide backup power. They could reconfigure themselves, adapt to new threats, and continue operating even when 90% of the main system was destroyed. But Minho kept that information to himself. Meanwhile, Captain Yuna had become very good at looking helpless while actually being extremely observant. On the patrol vessel, she continued to perform the menial tasks that Commander Vextar assigned to her, but she was also building relationships with the lower-ranking crew members. Ensign Jae-hyun was a communications specialist from a species that looked like tall, thin plants with glowing leaves. He was considered one of the least important crew members, which meant that Vexatar ignored him completely. That made him perfect for Yuna's purposes. The communication logs must be very complicated to manage, Yuna said one day as she helped. Jae-hyun organized data files. Oh yes, Jae-hyun replied, his leaf-like appendages rustling with pride. I handle all the fleet coordination data, tactical updates, supply requests. It's very important work even if the commander doesn't notice. I'm sure it is. It must be interesting to see how all the different ships coordinate their activities. Would you like to see? Most of it isn't classified, and you seem like the only person on this ship who appreciates the complexity of logistics. Yuna spent the next several hours learning about Federation fleet organization, supply chains, and communication protocols. Jae-hyun was delighted to have someone who listened to his explanations with genuine interest. He had no idea that Yuna's human brain was analyzing everything he showed her, looking for patterns and weaknesses. Back on Nexus Prime, Ambassador Wu Jin had changed his approach to the trade negotiations. Instead of trying to convince the aliens that humans had something valuable to offer, he focused on learning about their economic systems. Your efficiency is truly impressive, he told economic analyst Yoonbi during one of their private meetings. Yoonbi was also human, but she had been assigned to study galactic finance rather than participate in trade discussions. The scary thing is they're right about their efficiency, Yoonbi replied, showing him charts and data streams on her portable computer. Their distribution networks can move goods across the galaxy in days. Their manufacturing systems can produce anything they need in vast quantities. So what's the problem? There is no redundancy. Everything depends on a few critical choke points. If something disrupted the main trade routes, or if key manufacturing worlds went offline, the whole system would collapse within weeks. And they don't see this vulnerability? Why would they? Nothing has ever disrupted their system before. They've had peace and stability for so long that they've forgotten how to deal with chaos. Wu Jin smiled grimly. Humans are very good at dealing with chaos. In another part of the station, Intelligence Officer Tae-hyung and Data Analyst Ji-soo were working on a different kind of project. They had requested access to the Federation's historical databases, claiming they wanted to learn about galactic culture and civilization. Look at this, Ji-soo said, pointing to patterns in the data. Every few hundred years, a new species develops faster than light travel and asks to join the Federation. And look what happens to the ones who don't fit the established patterns. Ji-soo highlighted several entries. The Kavari were relocated because their territorial instincts made them incompatible with galactic civilization. The Nexum were placed under protective custody because their genetic engineering made other species uncomfortable. The Draleth were classified as a dangerous mental influence and quarantined on their home world. Tae-hyung studied the records carefully. They don't just eliminate species that are too violent or too aggressive. They eliminate species that think differently. Exactly. Any species that might challenge the established order or introduce new ideas or refuse to follow the accepted patterns of galactic civilization. So what happened to all these species? Officially, they all suffered tragic accidents, or chose isolation, or died out from natural causes. Ji-soo's voice was grim. Unofficially, I think the Federation has been systematically eliminating potential competitors for thousands of years, and now they're studying us. Dr. Somin had reached a similar conclusion through her biological research. She had been given access to extensive databases about different species evolution and development, supposedly to help her understand how humans might fit into galactic society. The pattern is very clear, she told Ji-won during one of their private conversations. Every successful galactic species has evolved along similar lines. They become specialized for specific environments and roles. They develop rigid social structures. They lose the ability to adapt quickly to new situations. And species that don't follow this pattern don't survive long enough to become major galactic powers. At least, not until now. What makes humans different? We kept our adaptability. Most species, when they develop intelligence and technology, stop evolving behaviorally. They find something that works and stick with it for millions of years. Humans never stopped adapting, never stopped changing, never stopped learning new ways to survive. Is that why they see us as weak? They see us as unfinished, like we're some kind of larval stage that hasn't developed into a proper adult species yet. They expect us to eventually settle into a specialized role like everyone else. And if we don't, then we become a problem that needs to be solved. That evening, Jaiwan called another meeting of all human personnel. The mood in the room was much more serious than it had been 3 months earlier. "I think we all know why we're here," she began. "We're not just being underestimated or humiliated, we're being evaluated. And if we don't pass their evaluation, we're going to disappear like a lot of other species before us." "How long do we have?" Hyunwoo asked. "Hard to say, but I don't think we have years, maybe months." "So what do? We accelerate our timeline. Minho, how are your defensive system modifications coming?" "Almost finished. I've installed adaptive protocols in about 60% of the border defense networks. They think it's just backup systems, but it's actually a completely new kind of defense grid." "Yuna, what about fleet intelligence?" "I've mapped most of their standard operating procedures. Jaehyun has been very helpful, and he doesn't even realize it. Their tactics are predictable, but their ships are well designed. If we can control the tactical situation, we might be able to level the playing field." Woo Jin, economic warfare options. Yunbi and I have identified 17 critical vulnerabilities in their supply chains. If we can disrupt the right nodes at the right time, we can cause system-wide chaos. Taehyung, intelligence gathering. Jisoo and I have located the classified files about what really happened to the disappeared species. We can't access them yet, but we know where they are. If we ever get the chance, we can prove what the Federation has been doing. Jiwon looked around the room at her fellow humans. 3 months ago, they had been hopeful diplomats and scientists, eager to join galactic civilization. Now they were something else entirely, a resistance movement preparing for a war that hadn't started yet. Everyone knows what they need to do, she said finally. "Stay quiet, stay careful, and get ready, because I have a feeling our time is running out." Outside the station's windows, the galaxy continued its ancient rotation, unaware that everything was about to change. The emergency alarms had been screaming across Nexus Prime for 3 hours. In the main council chamber, holographic displays showed red warning symbols spreading across the galaxy's outer rim. The Krillian Empire, a species that had been contained beyond Federation borders for centuries, had suddenly launched massive attacks on 12 different worlds. Council Prime Thexvor stood before the assembled representatives, his massive form radiating confidence despite the crisis. "The Krillian attack is significant but manageable," he announced. "Our forces are vastly superior in both technology and numbers. We will crush this rebellion within days." Xiphon 7 floated nearby, its musical voice adding harmonious agreement. "The Malari battle fleets are already moving to intercept key Krillian forces. Our computational models predict a 97% probability of swift victory." In the observer section, Commander Hyunwoo listened carefully to the alien battle plans. Everything was exactly as he had expected. Massive formations of powerful ships, overwhelming firepower, direct frontal assaults designed to break enemy resistance through pure force. It was impressive and completely predictable. "Human delegation," Thexavor's voice boomed across the chamber. "Your species may contribute to this effort by providing support services to our main forces, supply runs, medical evacuation, communications. Relay!" Tasks suitable for your limited capabilities. Ji-won stood up from the human section. We would be honored to assist the Federation in any way possible. Excellent. Report to military coordination for your assignments. Try not to get in the way of real warriors. The dismissal was clear, and most of the aliens had already stopped paying attention to the humans. They were focused on their grand strategies and glorious battles. None of them noticed the small smile that crossed Hyunwoo's face as he followed Ji-won out of the chamber. 2 days later, Captain Yuna found herself in command of the patrol vessel she had been serving on. Commander Vexistar had suffered an unfortunate accident during the first Krillian engagement. His rigid, tactical thinking had led him directly into an enemy trap. The ship had survived, but Vexistar had not. Captain Yuna, Ensign Jae-hyun spoke. From the communications station, we're receiving orders to join the main fleet advance on the Krillian stronghold at Theta 7. Yuna looked at the tactical display. The Federation plan was exactly what she had expected, a massive frontal assault with overwhelming force. It would probably work, but it would also cost thousands of ships and millions of lives. Jae-hyun send a message to Fleet Command. Tell them we're having engine problems and will need to take a longer route to the battle zone. Engine problems, Captain? Yes, very serious engine problems that will require us to take a more creative approach to reaching our destination. The alien crew members looked confused, but they followed orders. They had learned that when humans did things that seemed strange, the results were often surprisingly effective. Meanwhile, Dr. Minho was watching, his defensive systems being put to their first real test. The Krillian forces had developed new tactics that caught the Federation completely by surprise. Instead of the expected massive fleet actions, they were using small, fast groups to hit multiple targets simultaneously. The traditional Vorthak defensive systems were failing badly. Their rigid arrays could deliver devastating firepower against expected attack patterns, but they couldn't adapt when the enemy did something different. Fortress after fortress fell as the Krillians exploited weaknesses that the Federation had never imagined. But the stations where Minho had installed his modifications were different. When Krillian attackers approached using unconventional routes, the defense systems reconfigured themselves in real time. Weapon platforms that had been pointing in one direction suddenly rotated to cover new angles of attack. Shield generators that had been protecting against frontal assault shifted to defend against attacks from below or above. How is this possible? Kelthrin demanded, staring at the tactical reports. Defense Station Gamma 9 was attacked by 40 Krillian ships using a pincer movement through the asteroid field. Our calculations showed this should have resulted in total station loss. What actually happened? Minho asked, though he already knew. The station destroyed 37 of the attacking ships and suffered only minor damage. The defense grid somehow anticipated the enemy approach and reconfigured itself to meet the threat. Maybe the station commander made some good tactical decisions. The station commander was killed in the first exchange of fire. The defensive systems continued to adapt and respond for 6 hours without any central control. Kelthrin looked at Minho suspiciously. Did you add something to those backup systems that you didn't tell me about? Just some adaptive protocols, Minho said innocently. Human paranoia, remember? 3 systems away, Pilot Nari and Scout Dohyun were conducting a reconnaissance mission that alien commanders had declared impossible. They were flying through the Helix Nebula, a region of space filled with electromagnetic storms and gravitational anomalies that made normal navigation equipment useless. Federation Command thinks this area is impassable, Do-hyun said, reading from their mission briefing. They want us to confirm that the Krillians can't be using it as a staging area. Federation Command is about to get a surprise, Nari replied, her hands dancing over the manual flight controls. She had shut down all the automated systems that alien pilots relied on, choosing instead to fly by instinct and experience. For 3 days, They threaded their way through the nebula, using techniques that would have been impossible for any alien pilot to understand. They rode gravitational waves like an Earth surfer rides ocean waves. They used electromagnetic storms for cover, hiding their ship's energy signature in the natural chaos of the nebula. What they found in the heart of the nebula made both of them whistle in surprise. A massive Krillian fleet was indeed using the area as a staging ground, but not in any way the Federation expected. Instead of hiding, the Krillians were using the nebula's natural phenomena to supercharge their weapons and shields. "Command is going to want to see this," Do-Yun said, recording everything they could see. "Command is going to want to attack this," Nari corrected. "And they're going to want to do it the traditional way, with massive force and frontal assault, which would be a disaster in this environment, unless someone shows them a better way." Back on Nexus Prime, intelligence specialist Sunho and tactical analyst Hyun were working around the clock to provide Commander Hyunwoo with detailed assessments of Krillian weaknesses. But they weren't focusing on the technological or military weaknesses that alien analysts had already identified. "Look at this pattern," Hyun said, pointing to psychological profiles of captured Krillian prisoners. "They're a very hierarchical species, even more rigid than the Federation races. Every decision has to go up through multiple levels of command. So, if we could disrupt their command structure, their entire military would become paralyzed. But how do we get to their commanders? They're protected by layers of defenses and protocol." "We don't attack their commanders," Sunho said thoughtfully. "We attack their confidence in their commanders. Krillians follow orders because they believe their leaders are infallible. What happens if we prove that their leaders can make mistakes?" "Psychological warfare. Make them doubt their own chain of command." "Exactly. And humans are very good at psychological warfare. The war's first phase continued to go badly for the Federation. Despite their technological superiority, they were losing ships and territory at an alarming rate. The Krillians seemed to anticipate every move, counter every strategy, and exploit every weakness. In the council chambers, arguments raged between different alien factions. The Vorthak demanded larger armies and more powerful weapons. The Malari wanted to retreat and recalculate their strategies. Other species proposed everything from negotiated surrender to the use of planet-killing weapons. Through it all, the humans continued their support roles, quietly providing supply runs and communications relay. Nobody paid much attention to them, which was exactly what Hyunwoo wanted. "How are the preparations coming?" Ji-won asked during one of their secret meetings. "Better than expected," Hyunwoo replied. "The aliens are so focused on their traditional approach to warfare that they're not noticing what we're really doing. Minho's defensive systems are already proving their worth. Yuna's ships are gathering intelligence while pretending to have mechanical problems. Our reconnaissance teams are finding things that alien scouts missed." "And the enemy?" "The Krillians are good, but they're fighting the war they expect to fight against the Federation they expect to face. They don't know about us yet." "What's our next move?" "We continue to be helpful, obedient support personnel, and we wait for the right moment to show everyone what humans can really do." Outside the station, alien warships continued to launch. Toward the distant battlefronts, their crews confident in their superior technology and proven tactics. None of them suspected that the greatest change in galactic military history was about to be introduced by the weak little species they had, dismissed as barely worthy of notice. The humans were about to remind the galaxy why they had conquered their own planet's apex predators. The war had been going badly for 6 weeks. Federation forces were in retreat across 12 different star systems, and the Krillian advance seemed unstoppable. In the council chambers of Nexus Prime, panic was beginning to replace confidence. Council. Prime Thexvor stood before a holographic display showing red enemy positions spreading like an infection across the galaxy. His massive form seemed somehow smaller than before, and his voice carried a note of desperation that had never been there earlier. "We need more ships," he declared. "More weapons, more firepower. The Krillians cannot be allowed to continue this. Advance. More ships will not help if our tactics remain predictable, Xiphon 7 replied, its musical voice somehow discordant now. The enemy anticipates our every move. Perhaps we should withdraw to defensible positions and recalculate our approach. Withdraw! Thexvor's roar echoed through the chamber. The Vorthak Empire does not retreat. We advance and crush our enemies through superior force. Superior force has not been working, pointed out another council member, a crystalline being whose faceted body was flickering with nervous energy. Perhaps it is time to consider alternative strategies. From the observer section, Commander Hyun Woo watched the argument with growing satisfaction. The aliens were doing exactly what he had predicted. When their preferred methods failed, they became paralyzed by indecision and internal conflict. Human delegation. Thexvor's voice cut through the chamber. Your support efforts have been adequate, but the Federation requires more substantial assistance. We are reassigning your forces to direct combat roles. Jiwon stood slowly, her expression carefully neutral. We would be honored to serve in whatever capacity the Council deems appropriate. Excellent. You will take command of the forces in Sector 7. It is a dangerous assignment, but your loss would not significantly impact our overall strategy. What Thexvor didn't say, but everyone understood, was that Sector 7 was where the Federation had been sending expendable assets. It was a region of space considered too dangerous for valuable alien forces, but too important to abandon entirely. We understand, Jiwon replied. When do we deploy? Immediately. Try not to die too quickly. 3 days later, Captain Yuna found herself leading a fleet of 30 ships toward the Sector 7 war zone. Her vessels were a mixed collection of damaged Federation ships, obsolete designs, and experimental craft that had been deemed too unreliable for frontline service. Her crew was equally diverse, humans, of course, but also members of minor alien species that the major powers considered expendable. Beings like Ensign Jae-hyun, whose plant-like species was valued only for their communication skills, and Engineer Boram, a human who had been working with a squid-like alien named Vrylak. Captain, Jae-hyun reported from his communication station, we're receiving reports of massive Krillian fleet movements in our operational area. Federation intelligence estimates we'll be facing odds of approximately 10 to 1. 10 to 1, Yuna mused. That seems almost fair. The alien crew members looked at her with confusion, but the humans on the bridge smiled. They had been waiting for this moment. All ships. This is Captain Yuna. We're about to engage a superior enemy force using tactics they've never seen before. Follow my lead, trust your training, and remember, we're not here to win by playing their game. We're here to change the rules. The battle that followed was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Instead of the traditional formation attacks that both Federation and Krillian forces used, Yuna's fleet scattered into small groups that moved independently through the combat zone. The Krillian commanders, expecting a conventional engagement, found themselves facing an enemy that refused to fight conventionally. Human-led ships appeared behind their formations, struck fast and hard, then disappeared before defensive fire could be brought to bear. They used asteroids for cover, hid in sensor shadows, and coordinated their attacks in ways that confused and frustrated their enemies. How are they doing this? Demanded Krillian Fleet Commander Zareth, watching his tactical display with growing alarm. Our sensors show 30 ships, but they're attacking from 60 different positions. The humans are using deception tactics, his intelligence officer reported. They're making false sensor signatures, using electronic warfare, and coordinating attacks in ways our computers cannot predict. Humans? Those weak primates the Federation keeps as pets? It appears they are not as weak as we believed, Commander. Meanwhile, on the ground, Commander Kangmin was leading human forces in operations that alien strategists had declared impossible. The surface of Hellworld Tertius was a nightmare of poisonous atmosphere, crushing gravity, and temperatures that could melt most alien life support systems. "This planet is uninhabitable," the alien military briefing had stated. "No significant combat operations are possible in this environment, but humans had evolved on a planet that was trying to kill them every day. Compared to Earth's deserts, Arctic regions, and deep ocean trenches, Hellworld Tertius was just another challenging environment. Kangman's forces moved through the hostile landscape like ghosts, appearing behind Krillian supply lines and command, posts that the enemy had thought were completely secure. They struck without warning, destroyed their targets, and vanished back into the poisonous mists before reinforcements could arrive. "Sir," reported Sergeant Minji, her environmental suit readings showing conditions that would have killed most. "Galactic species within minutes. We've identified the main Krillian logistics hub. It's heavily defended, but they're not expecting an attack from this direction." "Because this direction is supposed to be impassable," Kangman replied. "Show me the approach routes." High above the planet, pilot Nari was conducting her own form of warfare. The space around Hellworld Tertius was filled with debris fields, radiation storms, and gravitational anomalies that made conventional space combat extremely dangerous. "Control, this is Flight Leader Nari," she spoke into her communicator. "I'm taking my squadron through the Maelstrom field to attack the Krillian command ship." "Negative, Flight Leader. The Maelstrom field is classified as completely impassable. No ship can survive transit through that area." "Good thing we're not just any ships," Nari replied, switching off her communication system. Navigation specialist Sungjin, flying as her wingman, laughed over the squadron frequency. "I love it when they tell us something is impossible. It's just means we get to prove them wrong," Nari agreed. The human fighter squadron plunged into the Maelstrom field, using flying techniques that would have been suicidal for any alien pilot who depended on computer assistance. They rode the edge of gravitational wells, used radiation storms for cover, and navigated by instinct through space that their own instruments couldn't properly map. When they emerged on the far side of the field, they found the Krillian command ship exactly where intelligence had predicted it would be. The enemy vessel was massive and heavily armed, but it was also completely unprepared for an attack from an impossible direction. "All fighters, this is Nari. Target the command ship's communication arrays. We're going to cut off their ability to coordinate their forces." The attack was swift and devastating. Before the Krillian defenders could react, their primary command vessel was crippled and drifting, its communication systems destroyed, and its command crew dead or injured. Across the Sector 7 combat zone, similar scenarios were playing out. Human forces were appearing in places they couldn't be, attacking in ways that made no sense according to accepted military doctrine, and achieving results that alien strategists had calculated as impossible. Dr. Minho's adaptive defense systems were proving their worth on a massive scale. As Krillian forces encountered his modified stations, they found themselves facing defenses that learned from each attack and adapted in real time. Weapons that had been effective in the first assault became useless in the second. Attack patterns that had worked against traditional Federation defenses failed completely against systems that could think and adapt. But the most devastating human weapon wasn't technological, it was psychological. Intelligence specialist Sunho and tactical analyst Heian had been working to implement their plan to undermine Krillian confidence in their command structure. "Phase 1 is complete," Sunho reported to Hyunwoo during one of their encrypted communications. "We've been feeding false information to mid-level Krillian commanders, making it look like their superiors are giving contradictory orders. And the results? Exactly what we predicted. The Krillian military is starting to fragment. Local commanders are beginning to make independent decisions because they can't trust the orders they're receiving from above." Perfect. A rigid hierarchical system is only strong when everyone trusts the hierarchy. Once that trust breaks down, the whole structure collapses. Within 2 weeks, the tide of war had completely reversed. Krillian forces that had been advancing confidently across 12 star systems were now in full retreat, confused and demoralized by an enemy that refused to follow the established rules of galactic warfare. But the biggest shock came when other Federation forces tried to understand what the humans had accomplished. "This is impossible," Thexvor declared, staring at the tactical reports. 30 human ships defeated a Krillian fleet of 300 vessels. The victory celebrations on Nexus Prime felt hollow to anyone who was paying attention. While alien dignitaries congratulated each other on their triumph over the Krillian Empire, the mood in the council chambers was tense and suspicious. Everyone knew that something fundamental had changed, but no one wanted to admit what it meant. Council Prime Thexvor stood before the assembled representatives, his massive form radiating barely controlled anger. "The human forces achieved remarkable success in Sector 7, he announced, his voice carefully neutral. "However, their methods require careful examination to ensure they comply with accepted standards of galactic warfare." Xiphon 7 floated nearby, its musical voice carrying undertones of worry. "The Malari Collective has analyzed human tactical innovations. While effective, they demonstrate a concerning disregard for established military doctrine. Such unpredictability could destabilize galactic civilization." From the Observer section, Jiwan watched the proceedings with growing alertness. The aliens weren't celebrating human success. They were looking for ways to contain it. "Human delegation," Thexvor continued. "You will provide complete tactical assessments of your operations. All weapon modifications, strategic innovations, and operational procedures must be documented and reviewed by Federation military authorities." "Of course," Jiwan replied smoothly. "We're always happy to share our methods with our allies." But, while the public discussions continued, other conversations were happening in the shadows. Ambassador Wu Jin had been working with economic analyst Yunbi to implement their plan to restructure galactic trade networks, and the results were becoming impossible to ignore. The supply disruptions from the war created exactly the chaos we predicted, Yunbi reported during one of their secret meetings. Traditional trade routes were cut, manufacturing centers were destroyed, and distribution networks collapsed. And our alternative systems? Operating at full capacity, human-controlled supply lines are now handling 60% of critical resource distribution in the affected sectors. Species that were calling us primitive 6 months ago are now completely dependent on our logistics networks. Wu Jin smiled grimly. "And I assume we're charging appropriate rates for our services?" "Oh yes, very appropriate rates." The economic pressure was just one part of the human strategy. Intelligence Officer Tae-hyung had finally gained access to the classified Federation files that detailed what had really happened to the disappeared species over the past millennia. "It's worse than we thought," he told Jiwan during an encrypted communication. "The Federation didn't just eliminate species that were too violent or aggressive. They systematically destroyed any civilization that showed signs of independent innovation or tactical creativity." "How many species?" "At least 47 that we can document, maybe more. The Kavari were eliminated because they developed new forms of energy manipulation. The Nexum were destroyed because their genetic engineering threatened biological stability. The Dralith were quarantined and then quietly exterminated because their mental abilities could influence other species. Decision-making. And now they're planning the same thing for us. The preliminary authorization has already been drafted. They're just waiting for the right excuse." Dr. Sumin had reached a similar conclusion through her biological research. "I've been analyzing the genetic patterns of all major galactic species," she reported. "There's clear evidence of artificial selection pressure. Someone has been guiding galactic evolution for millions of years, eliminating traits like adaptability, creativity, and independent thinking. To what end? Control. A galaxy full of specialized, predictable species is easy to manage. A galaxy with humans in it is not." The crisis came to a head when Thexvor attempted what amounted to a military coup. During an emergency council session, he declared that humanity represented a fundamental threat to galactic stability and called for immediate action. The humans have demonstrated abilities that violate natural law, he announced to the assembled representatives. Their tactics are chaotic, their innovations are unpredictable, and their influence is spreading to other species. This contamination must be stopped before it destroys everything we have built. Several alien factions nodded in agreement. The Malari had already withdrawn their fleets to defensive positions. Other species were mobilizing their forces under the pretense of maintaining order. But Thexivore had made a critical error. He had announced his intentions publicly, giving the humans time to respond. Attention all human personnel, Hyunwoo's voice carried across every communication channel in human-controlled space. Execute Protocol 7. Repeat. Execute Protocol 7. Across the galaxy, human forces that had been positioned as support units suddenly revealed their true capabilities. Dr. Minho's defensive networks came online simultaneously, creating an interconnected grid that spanned dozens of star systems. Stations that aliens had thought were simple supply depots transformed into heavily armed fortresses. Captain Yuna's fleet emerged from hidden positions throughout Federation space, their ships moving in coordinated patterns that no alien commander had ever seen before. They had been using the months of support operations to map every weakness in Federation defenses and position themselves for maximum effect. Commander Kangmin's ground forces seized control of key installations across multiple worlds, moving with precision that left alien defenders stunned and helpless. Facilities that should have taken weeks to capture fell in hours. Pilot Nari led fighter squadrons in surgical strikes against military command centers, using routes through impassable space that allowed them to appear anywhere in the galaxy. Within hours of receiving orders, the battle for galactic supremacy was swift and decisive. The Vorthak Empire, built on the assumption of their own superiority, crumbled when faced with an opponent who refused to fight by their rules. Their massive battle fleets, designed for traditional formation combat, were helpless against human forces that struck from unexpected angles and disappeared before counterattacks could be organized. The Malari attempted to retreat to their core systems, hoping to use their technological advantages to hold off human forces. But their computational models had never been designed to handle truly unpredictable opponents. Their strategic calculations became meaningless when facing enemies who could adapt faster than computers could process. Other Federation species found themselves caught between human forces and their own collapsing command structures. Most chose to negotiate rather than fight, recognizing that the old order was finished. The final confrontation took place in the council chambers of Nexus Prime. Thexivore, his empire in ruins around him, faced Ambassador Jiwan across the chamber, where humans had first been dismissed as weak and primitive. "You have destroyed everything," he said, his voice carrying the weight of a fallen civilization. "Millions of years of progress, stability, order, all gone because of your chaos." "We didn't destroy your civilization," Jiwan replied calmly. "We revealed its weaknesses. A system built on the suppression of innovation and the elimination of competition was always going to fall eventually. We just made it happen faster. What happens now? Will you eliminate us as we would have eliminated you? That's the difference between us," Jiwan said. "We're not interested in elimination. We're interested in evolution." In the months that followed, humanity established itself as the dominant force in galactic civilization, but not in the way the Yadei previous powers had done. Instead of ruling through force and suppression, humans encouraged diversity, innovation, and independent thinking. Species that had been marginalized under the old Federation found themselves welcomed as equals. Technologies that had been suppressed were allowed to develop. Ideas that had been forbidden were explored and refined. Dr. Soman published her definitive study on the artificial evolution of galactic species, exposing the systematic suppression that had shaped civilization for millions of years. The revelation sparked a renaissance of scientific and cultural development as species rediscovered abilities they had forgotten they possessed. Economic systems that had been rigid and centralized became flexible and adaptive under human guidance. Ambassador Wu Jin and economic analyst Yunbi helped establish trade networks that rewarded innovation rather than conformity. Military doctrine was completely revolutionized as Commander Hyun Woo shared human tactical innovations with Allied forces. The rigid, predictable strategies that had dominated galactic warfare for millennia gave way to adaptive, creative approaches that made large-scale conflict both more difficult and less likely. Years later, when galactic historians tried to understand how humanity had achieved such rapid and complete victory, they focused on technological innovations, tactical superiority, and strategic planning. But Dr. Soman knew that the real answer was simpler and more profound. They called us weak because we didn't match their preconceptions, she wrote in her final report. They mistook adaptation for weakness, creativity for primitiveness, and determination for desperation. They had spent so long eliminating diversity from their civilization that they forgot why diversity was valuable in the first place. In a universe of specialists, humans remained generalists. In a galaxy of predictable responses, we remained unpredictable.